For more than 2 decades, life with Lisa felt like the kind of dream you didn't want to wake up from. We met when I was 27, and she was 24, both of us fresh off messy breakups. What started as a slow friendship blossomed into a love I thought could withstand anything. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we had our rhythms, our inside jokes, and that quiet, unspoken understanding that only comes from years of partnership. Lisa loved her work as a senior manager at a marketing firm. I used to tease her about how she could pitch a loaf of bread and make it sound like a luxury item. She was brilliant, ambitious, and every bit the partner I wanted. I worked as a contractor, building homes and small commercial spaces, which meant my hours were flexible. It gave me plenty of time to take care of things at home while Lisa climbed the corporate ladder. We didn't have kids, but that was a choice we made together. We wanted to travel, enjoy our lives, and focus on each other. And for most of our marriage, we did just that. We took spontaneous road trips, had lazy Sundays binge-watching crime dramas, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even the strongest-looking houses can have hidden cracks in their foundation. And those cracks? They started appearing when Lisa began staying late at work. Started so subtly, I didn't even question it at first. Lisa had always been a hard worker, and she often talked about how competitive her industry was. When she mentioned her workload had increased because of a new campaign, I didn't bat an eye. "I'll probably be home late for the next few weeks," she said one evening, kissing me on the cheek before heading out the door. "Don't wait up, okay?" "Of course," I replied, not thinking much of it. If anything, I admired her dedication. But as weeks turned into months, the late nights became routine. She wasn't just coming home late. She seemed different, distracted, preoccupied. On weekends, she spent more time on her phone, typing out emails or stepping outside to take work calls. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, Lisa had been there for me through thick and thin, and our relationship had never been built on suspicion. But even as I tried to brush it off, something inside me stirred, a quiet unease I couldn't shake. It wasn't until one Friday evening, when I'd surprised her by bringing dinner to her office, that the feeling solidified into doubt. I walked into the building with a bag of her favorite Thai takeout, excited to see her face light up. Her office lights were off, though, and her desk was empty. I waited for a moment, wondering if she was in a meeting, but the cleaning staff confirmed she had left hours ago. I remember driving home in silence, the untouched takeout bag sitting in the passenger seat. My mind was racing with questions, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her that night. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. The next morning, I casually asked about her evening. "How late were you at the office yesterday?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Oh, till about 10. The client presentation is next week, so it's all hands on deck right now." My stomach dropped. She was lying. I didn't call her out on the lie, not right away. I wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, that I'd misheard the cleaning staff or that Lisa had genuinely forgotten what time she'd left. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, and it started growing like an invasive weed. I began paying closer attention, noticing the small changes that had crept into our lives. Lisa started dressing a little sharper, even on casual Fridays. Her phone, once casually left on the counter or couch, was now always with her, face down. She started laughing at texts. Quick little chuckles she'd brush off when I asked, "What's so funny?" "Oh, just Karen being Karen," she'd say, referencing a coworker I barely knew. I started questioning my instincts. Was I overthinking? I'd heard about midlife crises. Maybe she was just finding new ways to feel good about herself. After all, we'd been together for over 20 years. It wasn't crazy to think she wanted to mix things up, but the part of me that had always trusted her felt off. One evening, I decided to test the waters. We were sitting in the living room, a movie playing in the background. Lisa was on her phone again, typing furiously. "Who are you texting so much these days?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She barely hesitated. "Work stuff. The client's a nightmare." That was her answer for everything lately. Work. Work was why she came home late. Work was why she couldn't go out for dinner like we used to. Work was why she seemed so distant. But something didn't add up. Lisa loved to vent about her job, always sharing the gossip and drama from her office. Now she barely mentioned it. I started to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. And then came the moment that shattered whatever denial I was still clinging to. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd gone to the store to grab a few things for dinner. Lisa had said she was meeting an old college friend for lunch, something she rarely did, and I thought it was a good chance for both of us to have some space. As I pulled into the parking lot of our local supermarket, I spotted her car. My first thought was that she'd forgotten something and decided to shop before her lunch. But then I saw her, Lisa, walking out of the coffee shop across the street. She wasn't alone. She was with a man. He was tall, younger than us, with sharp features and an easy smile. They were laughing as they walked, her hand brushing against his arm. It wasn't just friendly, it felt intimate. I stayed in the car, frozen. My heart raced, a mix of anger and disbelief coursing through me. This couldn't be what it looked like. Maybe it was a colleague? Maybe she wasn't comfortable talking about male coworkers because she knew how it might seem? I clung to excuses, anything to keep from jumping to conclusions. But then I saw the way she looked at him. The way her eyes lit up, the soft smile that lingered even when he wasn't saying anything. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I waited until they walked to his car. He opened the passenger door for her, and she slid in, laughing at something he said. I felt like I was going to be sick. The rest of the day was a blur. I didn't confront her when she got home. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious husband, asking casually about her lunch with her friend. "Oh, it was nice," she said with that same easy smile. "We caught up on old times. She's thinking about moving back to town." Lisa had lied to me again. And now I was certain there was more to it than just work. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Lisa, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene from the parking lot over and over in my head. The way she smiled at him. The way she lied to my face about her lunch. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I needed to know the truth. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. Noticing her schedule, her habits, even the way she spoke about her day. I began checking our phone bill, something I'd never done in all our years together. There were numbers that showed up repeatedly, late at night and during her supposed work hours. One number stood out, a number she called or texted almost daily. I wrestled with whether to confront her outright, but my gut told me she'd just find a way to explain it away. Lisa was smart, quick on her feet, and I wasn't sure I could outmaneuver her if I didn't have solid proof. One afternoon, when she left her phone unattended for a moment, I made my move. My hands were trembling as I opened her messages. I wasn't proud of myself, but at that moment I didn't care. The texts were there. The name saved under the number was Karen, but the messages didn't read like conversations between coworkers, or women, for that matter. They were filled with jokes, inside references, and moments that felt far too personal. And then I found it. A message from her just a few days ago. "I loved seeing you today. You always know how to make me smile." I felt like my chest had caved in. She'd lied to me, again and again. The woman I thought I'd known so well, the woman I had built my life with, had created this other world, one I didn't belong to. That night, I sat across from her at the dinner table, barely touching my food. I watched her laugh at a joke I'd made, her face so familiar, yet suddenly so foreign. "How was work today?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Busy as usual," she said, not missing a beat. "I've got another late night tomorrow. Don't wait up." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything more. But in my mind, I'd made another decision. I wasn't going to let this lie continue. The next evening, when Lisa left for another late night at work, I followed her. I felt a pang of guilt as I tailed her car from a distance, but the gnawing doubt had become too much. I needed answers. Her route didn't lead to her office. Instead, she turned down a quieter part of town, eventually parking outside a small, dimly lit restaurant. She got out of the car, adjusting her coat, and walked inside. Minutes later, he arrived, the man from the coffee shop. I parked my car a block away, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Confront her right then and there? Wait to see what happened. I decided to watch for a while, staying hidden near the window. Inside, they sat across from each other, their heads close as they talked and laughed. She reached across the table at one point, her hand brushing his. I didn't need to see more. The drive home was a blur. Anger, sadness, and disbelief all warred for space in my chest. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, how could she throw it all away? When she came home hours later, I was waiting in the living room. How was work? I asked, my voice calm, though my hands were clenched into fists at my sides. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice. Busy, she said, setting her bag down.
I'm exhausted.
I stood up, my eyes fixed on hers. Don't lie to me, Lisa. Her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I know you weren't at work tonight. I followed you. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. I saw you, I said, my voice rising. With him. At the restaurant. For a moment, I thought she might confess, but then her expression hardened. You're being ridiculous. He's a coworker. We were discussing the campaign. That's all. Her denial hit me like a slap. Even caught red-handed, she refused to admit the truth. Do you think I'm stupid? I asked, my voice shaking. I've seen the texts. I've seen how you've changed. This isn't just work, Lisa. She glared at me, her jaw tight. I don't know what you think you've seen, but you're wrong. I'm not doing anything wrong. Her defiance only deepened the ache in my chest. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. That night, she slept in the guest room, and I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. The house was silent the next morning, the kind of heavy quiet that comes when words have cut too deep. Lisa avoided me as she got ready for work, moving through the house like a ghost. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to let it go, to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. Maybe it was easier that way. But another part of me, the part that felt betrayed, angry, and heartbroken, knew there was no going back. By mid-morning, I decided to take a bold step. I called the number that had been popping up on her phone bills, the one saved as Karen. It rang twice before a man's voice answered. Hello. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't planned what I would say, and now that the moment was here, I felt like my throat had closed up. Hi. I finally managed, my voice shaking. I'm Lisa's husband. There was a long pause. Then, in a cautious tone, he said, Okay. What's this about? My anger boiled over. I think you know exactly what this is about. I've seen the texts. I've seen you with her. So why don't you stop pretending and tell me the truth? Another pause. This one felt heavier, like the weight of his silence was pressing down on me. Look, he said finally, I don't want any trouble. Lisa told me things were complicated between you two. She made it seem like what? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Like your marriage was already over, he said almost defensively. She told me you were separated. The words hit me like a freight train. I felt a mix of disbelief and fury. Separated? We're not separated. We're still married. We live in the same damn house. He sighed. I didn't know. I swear. I wouldn't have. I hung up before he could finish. I didn't care about his excuses or his side of the story. What mattered was that Lisa had lied to him, too. She was building a web of deception, spinning it out to everyone around her. When Lisa came home that evening, I didn't wait for pleasantries. I talked to him, I said as soon as she walked through the door. Her face paled. You talked to who? Your coworker. The one you've been sneaking around with, I said, my voice trembling with anger. He told me everything, Lisa. How you lied to him about us. How you told him we were separated. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. But there were no words that could fix what she had done. For the first time, I saw something crack in her facade. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked away. But still, she didn't admit it. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she murmured. I don't know." Her non-answer only deepened the chasm between us. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. "I don't know," I repeated, my voice rising with incredulity. "That's all you have to say? After everything we've been through, all the years we've spent together, you don't know?" Lisa stood there, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked small, like a child caught in a lie, but there was no innocence in her expression, just guilt and defiance. "What do you want me to say?" she snapped, her tone sharp. "That I made a mistake? Fine, I made a mistake. But you're not perfect either, Mike. You've been so checked out for years. Maybe if you'd paid more attention." I felt my blood boil. "Don't you dare try to pin this on me," I interrupted. "I was here. I was always here. You're the one who lied. You're the one who went looking for something outside of our marriage." She didn't respond, just stood there glaring at me, her jaw tight. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might finally break, that she might apologize, admit the truth, and try to salvage what was left of our relationship. But instead, she turned and walked past me, heading toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice still trembling with anger. "To bed," she said coldly. "I can't deal with this right now." That was it. That was her response to 20 years of marriage falling apart. I sat alone in the living room for hours, replaying our argument in my mind. Every word, every look, every lie. It felt like the foundation of my life had crumbled beneath me, and I didn't know how to start picking up the pieces. When I finally went to bed, the door to the guest room was closed. I stood outside for a moment, debating whether to knock, whether to try one more time to reach her. But then I heard her muffled voice. She was on the phone. I didn't need to hear the words to know who she was talking to. That night, I slept on the couch. Or at least I tried to. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and avoidance. Lisa and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was clipped and perfunctory. Discussions about groceries or bills, nothing deeper. The air between us felt suffocating. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. The uncertainty, the lies, the constant second-guessing. It was eating me alive. I decided that if Lisa wasn't going to admit the truth, I'd force it out into the open. On Friday evening, I told her we needed to talk. She sighed, clearly exasperated, but sat down across from me at the dining table. "What now, Mike?" she said, her tone laced with impatience. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I want the truth, Lisa. No more deflections, no more excuses. Just tell me, are you having an affair?" Her eyes darted away, and for a moment, I thought I saw something. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But when she looked back at me, her expression was as cold as ever. "No," she said firmly. I felt my temper flare. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I've seen the texts. I've seen you with him. I've talked to him, Lisa. I know what's going on. Just admit it." Her face hardened. "I told you, there's nothing going on. You're blowing this way out of proportion."
I stared daher, incredulous.
Blowing it out of proportion? Are you serious? You've been sneaking around, lying to me for months, and I'm the one in the wrong. Lisa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not doing this," she said, her voice rising. "I'm not going to sit here and be accused of things that aren't true." I watched her storm out of the room, my hands shaking with frustration. How could she still deny it? Even when faced with undeniable evidence, she refused to own up to what she'd done. But the final blow came the next morning. I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it. An Instagram post from the man she'd been seeing. It was a picture of the two of them at the restaurant I'd seen them at, laughing together over drinks. The caption read, "Lucky to have this amazing woman in my life." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. There it was, laid out for everyone to see. Proof that Lisa wasn't just lying to me. She was building a whole new life behind my back. I confronted her with the post later that day. She didn't even try to deny it. "It's not what it looks like," she said weakly, but the defeat in her voice told me otherwise. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And I'm done." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just sat there, silent, as I walked away. The moment I walked out of that room, I knew there was no going back. 20 years of love, trust, and shared memories, all unraveled by a betrayal I couldn't ignore. I spent that night packing a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay under the same roof with Lisa any longer. She didn't come after me, didn't try to stop me. The only sound in the house was the zip of my suitcase and the occasional shuffle of my footsteps. When I finally left, I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a swirl of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief, and, strangely, relief. As much as it hurt to admit, the marriage I thought I'd been holding on to had already been gone for months, maybe even years. I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the walls were thin and the bedspread smelled faintly of bleach. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, and I needed quiet more than anything. Over the next few days, I started to piece together what my life might look like without Lisa. I called a lawyer, explaining the situation as objectively as I could, though my voice cracked more than once. I contacted a few close friends, people I trusted to support me without judgment. And then I called Lisa. "I'm filing for divorce," I said without preamble. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I figured you would," she said softly. Her tone caught me off guard. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just resignation. "Is that all you have to say?" I asked, my voice thick with frustration. "What do you want me to say, Mike?" she replied. "That I'm sorry? That I regret what happened? Of course I do. But I can't undo it. I can't go back and fix everything. Maybe I wanted to at some point, but I don't know. Maybe we were broken before this even started." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Was she right? Had we been broken all along, and I just hadn't seen it? Or was this her way of justifying what she'd done? "I guess it doesn't matter anymore," I said finally. "What's done is done. I'll have the papers sent over in a few days." "Okay," she whispered. That was the last time we spoke as husband and wife. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Signing the divorce papers felt surreal, like I was erasing 2 decades with a few strokes of a pen. I kept replaying moments from our marriage in my head. The good, the bad, the quiet ones in between, and wondering where it had all gone wrong. I stayed at the motel for a couple of weeks, just long enough to find a small apartment. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom with creaky floors and mismatched appliances, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I had a space that was just for me. The first few nights there were the hardest. I'd reach for Lisa in the bed, out of habit, only to find an empty space. Meals felt strange without her sitting across from me, filling the silence with stories about her day. Even the quiet hum of the apartment seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. But slowly I started to adjust. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years because I'd been so wrapped up in my life with Lisa. I even started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done since my early 40s. One evening, while unpacking a box of old photos, I came across an album from our 10th anniversary trip to Italy. Lisa's smile in those pictures was radiant, her eyes full of life and love. I sat there for a long time, staring at those frozen moments, wondering how we drifted so far from them. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I felt a deep, aching sadness. Not just for what she had done, but for what we had lost. There's a kind of grief that comes with realizing the life you thought you were living wasn't what it seemed. But there's also a freedom in letting go, in accepting that some things can't be fixed. I started therapy around that time, something I'd never thought I'd need. It helped more than I expected. Talking through the betrayal, the anger, and the hurt made it feel less like a storm raging inside me and more like a wound that could heal. One day, after a particularly difficult session, my therapist said something that stuck with me. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what she did. It's about freeing yourself from carrying the weight of it. I wasn't there yet, but I wanted to be. Months passed, and the sharp edges of the pain began to dull. Life didn't return to normal, how could it? But it settled into something new, something manageable. The divorce was finalized quietly. Lisa and I exchanged a few emails about dividing our things. But there was no grand confrontation, no dramatic finale. She kept the house. I let it go. It wasn't my home anymore. I found solace in small victories. Finishing a good book, cooking a meal for myself, feeling the soreness after a hard workout. I learned to enjoy my own company, to sit with the quiet and not feel crushed by it. One day, while cleaning out my inbox, I came across an old email from Lisa. It was from years ago during one of her work trips. She'd written me a long, heartfelt message about how much she missed me, how grateful she was for our life together. Reading it now, I didn't feel anger or sadness, just a bittersweet sense of closure. That version of Lisa, the one who had written those words, was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for a long time. The turning point came when a friend convinced me to join a hiking group. At first, I went just to get out of the apartment, to avoid spending another Saturday staring at the walls. But I ended up loving it. The fresh air, the camaraderie, the sense of accomplishment at the top of each trail. On one hike, I met a woman named Sarah. She was kind, easy to talk to, and had a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We started chatting more during the group meetups, and eventually, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I hesitated. Part of me felt like it was too soon, that I wasn't ready. But another part of me, the part that was learning to let go and move forward, said yes. We've been seeing each other casually, taking things slow. I'm not sure where it will go, and honestly, that's okay. For now, I'm just enjoying the moments as they come. Lisa is still a ghost in my life, a presence I feel in the background of my thoughts. But she doesn't haunt me anymore. The anger has faded, replaced by a kind of weary acceptance. People always say time heals all wounds. I don't know if that's true. Some wounds leave scars, reminders of the pain you've endured. But scars don't have to define you. I'm learning that moving forward isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finding the strength to keep walking, even when the path feels uncertain. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally walking in the right direction. Thank you for letting me share this journey. It was painful to relive, but cathartic to tell. Life is strange and unpredictable, but it's also resilient. And so am I.